Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is parallel session 14 on Dalit Feminism and Brahmanical Patriarchy, number 3. Sure, ma'am, we can wait for 5 more minutes and then we can begin. Ma'am, all the presenters are here. I think we should start.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's fine. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So, good morning, everyone. This is parallel session 14 on Dalit Feminism, Brahmanical Patriarchy 3, and this is to be chaired by Dr. Asha Singh. Dr. Asha Singh is an assistant professor in gender studies with the Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Calcutta. She has also taught at Ambedkar University, Delhi, Amity University, Noida, Adams University, Kolkata, and Mahatma Gandhi Antarashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya in Wardha. Prior to her academic career, she was a journalist in Hindi newspapers Nai Duniya, Bhopal, Lokmat Samachar in Maharashtra. Her PhD work from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai focuses on the intersections of gender, caste, and migration in Bhojpuri folk songs. Her current research focuses on the sociology of Bhojpuri language, its institutional history, and implications on social transformation. She has also written on OBC women's questions. She's published with the EPW, Sociological Bulletin, Sage, Routledge, and Prabuddha. As a bilingual scholar, she's contributed essays in popular platforms like Hindustan Times, Roundtable India, and Savary. Some of her noted works are Of Women by Men, Understanding the First Person Feminine in Bhojpuri Folk Songs, Bhojpuri Folk Songs as Scripts of Conjugal Performance, Differentiating the Hindi subject, Bhojpuri experience, and Parched and Feminism, all women's stories same. Are all women's stories same? Sorry. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you. We can start the session.
Thank you, Arna. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am. You're audible and visible.
Okay. So thank you, Arna, and I would like to thank the conference organizers, the entire team, Mahitosh Mandal, for having me here. And I have been listening to some of the sessions yesterday, and it has been a really wonderful experience. And without any further delay, we will start today's session because it's already 10:07. We have 4 presenters with us. All of them will be given 20 minutes each to present their papers. And we will have a Q&A session after all the presenters are done. So you might have seen the order of the presenters, but let me, just announce it once. We will have Arijeet Mandal's paper, and then we will invite Miss Talat, and Atufah Nishat will be the third presenter, and finally Sanghamitra Baladhikari will be presenting. So let me invite Arijeet Mandal, and before I hand over the stage to him, let me introduce him. Arijeet Mandal is currently employed as an assistant professor in the Department of Film Studies at Jadavpur University. He has submitted his PhD dissertation at the Department of English, University of Delhi. His PhD dissertation was on the philosophical and political history of disgust, titled Messed Up My Stomach, a study of concepts and natures of disgust in Indian short fiction. He has completed his MPhil degree from the Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Calcutta. Arijeet, the stage is yours.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, everyone. And very good morning to all of you. So basically, my paper would be, the crux of the argument is the role of semen in Brahminism. But 95% of my paper is a build-up to the argument. So title of the paper is Disgust, Virility, and Caste. Who knows? Humans are, in general, often disgusted by ourselves and other things around us. We are disgusted by rotting bodies, gangrene, pus, feces, smell of urine, rotten skin, and also disgusted by seemingly harmless objects as dust, dirt, mud, rust, and other things we consider as filth. The problem is, in fact, that disgust is not just limited to these things, but also felt as a bias against some people of certain castes, race, religion, gender, or sexuality. This aspect of disgust, in turn, changes the way in which we see others in our moral and socio-political affairs. Disgust raises questions about existence that seem to enjoy the benefits of social structure. And answer the question about few small statements. Disgust is an aversive emotion that we resort to the moment we meet objects that are out of order, out hyphen off hyphen order, out of order or breaches our faith in the order of things. The order of things is, of course, shaped by the material and psychological history of the people. This is not a mere difference of cultures or of individuals, but largely dependent on material conditions of being. Consider this for an example. A people from fertile land with relatively well distributed resources might have the luxury to throw away and consider some parts of an animal, insects, plants, or even some fruits as disgusting. However, it will not apply to people who live in arid areas. These material conditions shift towards these things and displaced it somewhere else. Similarly, a person with an unresolved trauma or severely repressed emotions might feel disgusted to even talk about seemingly harmless objects found in the household. All emotions are historical and they are shaped by material conditions of being and their interpretations. Disgust, like other emotions, also has a history of its own, a history of disgust. In the Astika texts of Indian philosophy, which is Astika would be um, the the texts or the schools who consider Veda as the truth. In the Astika texts of Indian philosophy, the closest discourse on emotion is the Rasa theory or Rasa. There was no descriptive word for architecture, craft, engineering, art in general. They would broadly fall under the same banner of Shilpa or Kala. At best, one would see appreciation as taste or tasting, asradayate, or to digest, sangraha. If you are to see the concept of rasa, specifically the odious or bibhatsya rasa, that comes closest to disgust, we face some major philosophical problems. The quintessential difference that sets bibhatsya aside from disgust is that it is but a rasa. K.C. Bhattacharya, in his essay, The Concept of Rasa, describes rasa as a phenomenon that is aesthetically enjoyed. There is no a priori universal logic behind it in its conceptualization. If indeed there is an essence, it is a metaphor. The repeated error people make of knowingly is to think rasa as theory of emotions. It is not. Rasa is neither an emotion nor a study of emotion. It is the essence of enjoyment by an enjoyer, rasika, that one gets upon contemplation of an emotion and its affect, i.e., rasa nispatti. In addition to that, rasas are not equal. Not all castes are allowed to evoke all kinds of rasa. The discipline exists to make sure that the status of so called upper castes are never disturbed. For example, in hasya or mirth, only some kinds are allowed for the dvija or twice born. It is not allowed for hasya to be used against the dvija or the hero. It can only be used against the rakshasa. And in the same way, karuna or pity is not to be shown to the dvija or the hero. Rasa is Astika Hinduism reflected in that's great equality. We still open in that sense that it can be by and against the Nayaka and Rakshasa alike. That is provided it does not compromise the upper caste position. It is still not a reading of disgust. Rasa does not come from direct confrontation with objects, but from the ambient detail like preksha or spectacle and sruti or listening. Disgust, on the other hand, is too real, too object oriented to be dependent on ambience alone, even if sight and sound of disgusting things plays a role. For all these and other reasons, I have put aside rasa theory as a tool to study disgust. The earliest commentary by any Western philosopher on something like disgust was, of course, by Aristotle. Aristotle, just like other philosophers, not directly addressed disgust. He talked about something mentions emotions belittling or humiliation, oligoria, contempt, kataphronesis, spite, eperiasmos, and insult, hubris, in his rumination on soul or psyche. There are several other Western philosophers who mention or discuss emotions at length, like René Descartes, Baruch Spinoza, and even Christian philosophers as Thomas Aquinas and Soren Kierkegaard. However, Europe's engagement with disgust as a philosophical or conceptual problem only seem to have come up since the 1800s. It is interesting to note that in all of its aesthetic history and history of ideas, Europe started discussing disgust, ugliness, repulsion, more specific way since the colonial time. And I think it is not one of the people who talked about disgust directly was the pioneer scientist Charles Darwin. In his book Emotions and Expressions of Man and Other Animals, Darwin argued about the possibility that disgust is an evolutionary trait, specifically human, and a bulwark against toxic elements in and around humans. The problem, however, is that his own example of disgust was showing how his ideas were insufficient in explanation of the problem he himself raised. Darwin mentions that in Tierra del Fuego, a native touched his food with bare hands, and immediately the native was disgusted at the cold cut meat, and Darwin was disgusted by the native's touching of the meat. In this case, quite clearly, there is a subject view and so dichotomies of food, hot, tundra, and other materialistic and cultural conditions at stake. Sigmund Freud also talks about disgust in a few of his works, though not in great detail. Notable mention was in the three essays on sexuality, where he argues that disgust comes largely due to libidinal overvaluation. We can also find it in Case History of Dora. Friedrich Nietzsche too mentions a nausea at the meeting of the greatest weight through eternal recurrence, and as the ressentiment among the underclasses. The first one is in the gay science, and the second was in genealogy of morals. However, phenomenological discourse on disgust starts only in the 1900s. Sandia was one of the first people who tried to read disgust as an emotional scientific manner as well as phenomenological. Sandia addresses the emotion of disgust in his works and maintains to a large extent that it is rooted in both existential concerns and cultural conditions. He largely seems to agree with the idea that disgust is an emotion that stops people from coming close to objects which are deemed unhealthy, but at the same time mentions how it is shaped by cultural values and positions of objects in symbolic order. However, the first book and major work that seems to be dedicated solely to the study of disgust is by Oral Kolnai. Kolnai, in his book on disgust, discusses how one of the basic principles of disgust is that we find disgusting is not what it is as much as what appears to be. For example, all uh, is that vegetables, fresh meat, and even fresh corpse are not considered disgusting, especially in the case of dead bodies. This aspect of disgust is extremely important, the one concerning death. We kiss our dead goodbye, we touch their feet, hands, cheek before sending them away, and lovers often kiss the lips of their dead beloved. However, all these feelings of attachment take flight should we find that the body has changed color, has rotten smell, it is dropping maggots, bloated, odious, and impalpably changing its composition from flesh to rotten meat or rotten flesh. Let us just say the fairy tale of the Sleeping Beauty would be a lot shorter if the princess had shown signs of decomposition and process. It's be disgusted by not the object, not what it is, but what it appears to be. Death makes us afraid, not disgusted. Or else, how do we mourn over the freshly deceased without throwing up? Why don't we have gag reflexes every time we think of death? That is, as long as we are conscious. This is because we are in awe of death, but disgusted with a certain mode of deadness. What William Miller, another pioneer on the subject of disgust, points out here is that we are not disgusted by death per se. What we are disgusted by is how death in itself is not the end. Life is teeming with a cosmic indifference to our sense of self. And in the end, the universe doesn't care about the specifics of a person. It just goes to a world with us, emotion evoked by certain kinds of horror. We are belittled at the edge of the known symbolic order and the vast unknown, a spot that makes us look away in horror, disgust, and revulsion. The emotion of disgust is kind of an anchor to hold on to the current symbolic order when faced by the unknown, a point that is also discussed in much more detail by Julia Kristeva in the form of abjection. That is why we shall see later, both in terms of caste system and Brahmanical patriarchy, deadness becomes extremely important. Disgust and class. Let us now look at class more closely. The lower classes, no matter how important a job they do for the safe functioning of a society and its economy, is already disaster. Had tended to avoid labor as much as possible. Whenever we look at slave society, feudal society, or the present capitalist society, the more technology has advanced, the further the ruling classes have removed themselves from labor. The bourgeoisie, in its imagination, thinks that certain manners of labor are beneath their status, just as the feudal lords before them. In a way, we can find that of a manner of labor, we can find that the more a manner of labor needs an active interaction with dirt, dust, filth, or simply getting one's hands dirty, the more it is considered as disgusting. While pen are used are reserved for cleaning, washing, scavenging, and some other so-called menial jobs. While the ruling classes are with jobs and considered respectable, the lower classes are humiliated for the work they do, no matter how important the latter's work is to the functioning of society. A major influence on a Marxist interpretation of history of emotion came from Marx's thesis on Feuerbach and subsequent works, which argue that human consciousness itself develops through dialectical relationships with materialistic conditions. A connecting author to the subject of Marxist school and study of disgust, horror, and other emotions are the works by French philosopher Georges Bataille. Bataille argues that the bourgeoisie as a class had never really cared much about cleaning or keeping cities and habitats clean, because it is made work sweeping in a well hygienic and clean place are never considered important, especially because they are not as profitable as exploitation of resources and labor in other areas. It is as if the clean streets, rivers, and sewages are taken as a passive right of a capitalist society to be maintained by some state machinery, and yet does not demand the enormous expenditure of capital. This filth in the streets, on the other hand, feeds into the conservative right wing imagination, and history has shown how the right wing always begins its solidifying appeal to the masses by a cleaning event, whether Goebbels der Zauberung or that with clean cleansing. Historically, the target enemy of right wing imagination has always been called by names that are supposed to evoke disgust. Whether Hitler's analogy of Jews being maggots in any German wound, this is from Mein Kampf, and or the imagination of the native whenever Macaulay referred about Indians from Minute, or whenever Dalits and Muslims are to in this country by the conservative sections of the society, disgust is evoked. Disgust seems to occupy a crucial role in dissociating and humiliation of the working classes and minorities, a situation that is also mentioned in detail by the experiments of psychologists as Pizarro, Rossi, and others, where it became clear that people tend to be more conservative if critical questions feel the environment. Some of the so-called disgusting languages and conservative language is discussed by Foucault as well. And we can find reflections of this in Charles Dickens' work as well. Anyway, disgust, caste, and Brahminical patriarchy. At this point in history, there should be discussions, but no doubt about the fact that caste is neither class nor a lineage of feudalism. The relationship of caste and disgust is totally different from relationship with class. In a class society, the ideological drive tries to convince people that with enough labor put into effect, a working class can become a bourgeoisie. In reality, however, one can become bourgeoisie only by two means, either through inheritance of capital or through of exploitation of working classes. Class become a working class individual making their way into wealth. Welcome perhaps has cold handshakes, but it is a welcome nonetheless, as is proven through myriad of literature and sporadic treaties among the bourgeoisie. However, caste system does not allow upward mobility or escape the regime of disgust. Caste traitors, Dalit or Brahmin, not only they not get rewarded but instead get punished. Let us take a look at the phenomenon. Along with the other Astika texts, Manu Samhita proposes the idea of four castes born of four different body parts, which represents the universal code man or social side. Brahman produces a hierarchy of castes based on how further it is from the ground. That is, the real and metaphorical materialistic conditions on which they stand on. The further away from material society, the happier Brahminism is. However, Brahma did not just imbibe castes with properties of body parts, but also with inherent and immovable qualities. The quality that is inherent in people, food, animals, and everything in the cosmos is its prakriti. Prakriti is the inner characteristic of an object, animal, or human. It is rather a sort of a mixed notion of tendency, intention, and nature. While animals and plants have their own prakriti, humans have their own, especially according to their caste and gender. Purity of the people in Brahminism is highly dependent on the aspect coded people based on some basic properties. These basic properties are known as gunas. Guna are the qualities present in all matters, including food and people. The three guna that differentiate the nature of beings are Satyagun or Sattik Gun, Tamogun, and Rajagun. All of these guna are present inside Brahma in harmony, but when it comes to what he created, there are differences in inherent guna of things. Satyagun permeates goodness, nobility, and joy when present. Rajagun emits egoism, selfishness, violence.
Arijeet,
Yeah.
sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but you have 5 more minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm almost done. Tamogun emits spirituality, lesbians, fear. Uh, because of how the humans are divided into different guna in accordance to the varna. The Brahmins are mostly Satyagun, Kshatriyas Rajagun, and Shudras are Tamagun. In Brahminical ideology, the division of guna among food too is supposed to work in a certain code of conduct. Food is believed to be divisible substance that enters the body and then through the digestive process and other metabolic processes becomes the very flesh and blood of the person. This is why it is not allowed for Brahmins to have anything other than Sattik food or food cooked and handled by Shudras. The contradictory argument of some regional Brahmins having non-vegetarian food is that if a food is offered to the god, then it becomes prasad or leftover food of god, this turning the food into Sattik food. Thus, we see that in caste-based system, the association labor or if at all it is only exists to reinforce the original idea of false ontological position. In a caste system, disgust comes from the idea of an ontological and teleological position of being. Every caste, every member is inherently born with a guna and dosha and a goal in life and a goal in a caste. So, moving from that, both in its ontological position and a diversion from that, are both disgusting. Disgust in caste society is therefore not both in being, not being, and not being from the for the repressed castes. An example of this would be the case where one faces disgust first Shudras and the relation of caste and disgust is because of certain essentialism inherent in nature of but at the same time, the quality of the guna. Secondly, the Dalit is seen as the with most disgust because in her very existence and all her actions, this specific caste is constant reminder for the Brahmin about the specific deadness of caste system. That is, life exists even at the tail end of a Brahminical worldview. Therefore, it must be a futile order. So I'm now reading the concluding paragraph. A note on Brahminical patriarchy. An important aspect of caste system is the treatment of women by Brahminical form of patriarchy. Brahminical patriarchy prescribes dharma to women and especially Slava is a lustful nightmare that may get in the way of endogamy. However, it is curious the way in which upper caste people do not drink or dine from the Dalits, and yet women from the same castes are coercively taken as sexual choices in many of the village programs, festivities, and crimes, as also pointed out by Ambedkar. So there must be some logic or some Brahminical justification of such contradictory acts. Even if they are acts of oppression and coercion, they have to be justified in the minds of not one, but entire castes of Brahmin and upper caste men. Kolenda points out that uh, how sociologists had come up with a conclusion that Hindu mythology and its worldview divides people not into individuals, but as individual. Roughly, this means that Hindus see themselves as already coded body, since the original was Brahma, whose part of the body came from the Hindu is already coded for the original protein of the god himself. These coded particles, also pinda, carried in sweat, hair, saliva, etc., are easily transferred from one person to another and therefore must be regulated and be exchanged only with a higher caste than one's own, um, at best a lower subcaste. However, semen is the disembodied agent that carries on purity without defiling the body it has left. We see instances of this through various mythological stories of gods and sages mating with women without losing their own qualities of purity. Just like the soul is not corrupted by rotting, sweating, bleeding body, semen seems to be the spirit of Brahminism. The other argument is that the sperm or the blood. Becomes the carrier of the. This is why it is considered a rise in the hierarchy to marry a woman from the lower caste, except that of the Dalits. For the women's subcaste, in essence, the semen becomes the symbolic of a carrier of the nobility and goodness of the man of that caste. Hence, it becomes the agent that stops the defiling when released in a woman. Therefore, semen in Brahminism becomes an agent of purity, independent of the body it has left, a way to stop impurity inherent in women and in the very idea of exogamy. Semen also becomes the sanitizer to control purity of the structure of Brahminism itself. In a way, the totem of Brahminism is semen, and the one thing that Brahminical patriarchy is not disgusted by semen is
Thank you, Arijeet. So we will have the discussions once all the presenters are done. But please, all of you, write down your questions in the chat box so that we don't forget when the Q&A session begins. But it was a fascinating presentation. And now let me move on to the next presenter of the day. Talat Malik, she is a research scholar in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, National Institute of Technology, Patna. Her interest areas are gender studies, diaspora, marginality, and cultural studies. She'll be reading her paper titled Dalit Women's Bodies from Docile to Resistive. Talat, you have 20 minutes. I'll remind you after 15 minutes, I'll give you a hint that you have five more minutes left. So okay. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay.
You are not visible,
Talat. I'll just share my screen, ma'am. Okay. I'll just share my screen and is my screen visible to you all?
Yes, uh, it's not in presentation mode yet, but
Uh,
it's visible. Yeah.
okay. Is it now, ma'am? Huh.
I can just see your slides and the icons on the left side. It's not in the presentation mode, but yeah. Now it's coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. This is Talat from Department of Humanities and Social Sciences and IT Patna. And the topic for my today's presentation is Dalit women bodies from docile to resistive. As Michel Foucault argues that body acts as both the target and object of operation in power dynamics, the purpose of this relationship between the powerful and the powerless is to ensure the disciplining of the body. The disciplining of the body is much needed to ensure to continue the functioning of the society where the powerful rules and the powerless are ruled. The Indian society is based on the hierarchical caste system where the Brahmins occupy the topmost position, followed by Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. The- There is a fifth group in India known as Atishudras. They are also called as Dalits. This group is marginalized and suppressed for millions of years. They are subdued culturally, socially, and physically by governing sections and are preserved by religious texts like Manusmriti. Exploitation or suppression of the powerless group is from time immemorial. The civilization of mankind has a vibrant record of harassment and subjugation of powerless by the powerful. The Dalits in India are regulated by the upper caste to ensure their continued hegemonization. Dalit writings which emerged in the 1960s and 70s, highlights the marginalization and exclusion faced by Dalit. Dalit literature talks about the suffering of oppressed section of the society and its study of the idea of marginalized and dehumanized condition of the Dalit. Here, experience becomes an important analytical tool to measure the sufferings of Dalits. The Dalit writer documents their trials and tribulations that they encounter in their everyday lives. They have view which is unique to them. They are the outsider, which are also at the same time occupies the space with insider. The rise of Dalit movement in India can be attributed to the negligence they felt at the hands of Dalit movements in India. Dalit movement in India are controlled and managed by men with nominal or no representation by Dalit women. In this movement, Dalit men only focused on the oppression and subjugation faced by whole community without highlighting talking about the gendered aspect of the separation. In the same way, women's movement in India only focused on the gendered aspect of suffering with no spatial reference to Dalit women as their condition in society as Dalit and as women makes them more vulnerable for violence. Therefore, they have neither representation in Dalit movement nor in women's movement. Sidelined by both these movements, they created a new specific platform to talk about their problems. Hence, Dalit feminism came into being. The body of the women are oppressed, mimed, and objectified to ensure their control by the patriarchal forces prevalent in the society. The body of the women become a site and receptor of operation. Their body are marked and valorized for the pleasure of men. To mark their subjugation, they are put under surveillance and are regulated by the norms and rules of the society. In a true Foucauldian fashion, they are induced fear, shame, and a sense of propriety. The invisible force in the form of regulation and social enforcement of patriarchal norms are employed to reproduce their docile bodies. A docile body produced is thus supposed to be obedient, easy to manage, monitored, and productive for the dominant force. Dalit women, who are all called Dalit among Dalit, are the most oppressed, humiliated, and marginalized group in India. Their bodies act as the site for the assertion of caste based pride. as it is true that objectification of all women takes place, but it is only in the case of Dalit women that they are muted. Their bodies are treated as muted and penetrable without any intervention because of the casteism involved in the violence. As Limbale mentions Bama in his book Aesthetics of Dalit Literature, quote, all women in the world are second-class citizens. For Dalit women, the problem is grave. Their Dalit identity gives them a different set of problems. They experience a total lack of social status. They are not even considered dignified human beings. Ostracism of Dalit women by upper caste people and also by their men have resulted into their double marginalization. The upper caste men, because of the caste system, have already put the Dalits into the marginal position, whereas the Dalit men, owing to the inherent patriarchal norms among themselves, has again further marginalized their women. For in this regard, I have taken two books by Faustina Bama, Sangati or Events, which came out in 2005, and Karuku, which came out in 2012. Karuku is also her autobiography, whereas Sangati is referred as the biography of her whole community. Stigmatization and sexualization of Dalit women bodies. Dalit women stories are full of the narratives and they are being being stigmatized and sexualized. The text traces a myriad of instances of oppression by the upper caste people. These texts highlight that in their day to day life, these women are humiliated and suppressed, and their bodies are stigmatized even from her childhood. Bama, as she mentions in Karuku, she was aware of the fact what is the meaning of untouchability. Their bodies, their bodies have already been stigmatized by that point, and they don't have any control over it. Whereas in another instance in Karuku, she again mentioned when she opposed the caste discrimination or untouchability when it was carried out on her body while traveling a bus. A Naika woman refused to sit next to her since she is a Dalit. Here, her body was stigmatized as an untouchable entity. The Dalit women bodies are not only stigmatized, but they are also sexualized by the upper caste people, especially men. For them, the bodies of Dalit women act as a site to carry out sexual violence. The body of Dalit women in this case not only acts as a site of operation but also as a mark of their upper caste men sexual prowess. In Karuku, Bama has again highlighted how the bodies of Dalit women are sexualized by the state machinery and particularly by police. They quote, they used obscene language and swore at them, told them that their husbands were away, they should be ready to entertain the police at night, winked at them, and shoved their guns against their bodies. In Sangati, unquote. In Sangati, again, Bama shared an incident where her grandmother told her that she must not come to forest alone on her own because if upper caste fellows clap eyes on you, you are finished. They'll drag you off and rape you. That is for sure. Unquote. The body of Dalit women becomes a site to carry out the caste as well as the gender violence. Sexual harassment and rape become a concern for the Dalit women by harassing the by harassing the lower caste women or Dalit women. Upper caste men claim their masculine dominance as well as the caste dominance over the Dalit women bodies and through them over Dalit community as a whole. Economic deprivation of Dalit women. The surveillance of women's bodies is done to ensure the dominance of men. This disciplining of women's body is done to maintain the hegemony of men in the society. The surveillance is done for both upper caste and lower caste women, but in the case of lower caste women, this is thricefold. They are subjugated to various rules. They are being treated as Dalit because of the prevalent caste system, as women because of the prevalent patriarchal system, and being a Dalit woman who is dependent on upper caste people for their economic well-being. the double patriarchal forces which the Dalit women face, that is the patriarchy by the upper caste men and also patriarchy by their own men, force them to the margin. The material aspect of this, as Hartman has described patriarchy as a set of social relations which has a material base. This material base of patriarchy has been highlighted by Bama in her Karuku as well, where she talks about how women they never received the appropriate payment for their labor. And again she talks in Sangati that even if they do the same job, they are paid half as much as their men folk. Here also the caste system, or we can say the material base of the caste system is working against the Dalit women, and it is further marginalizing them from this side in the society. And this economic dependence of Dalit women uh, has also is is also makes them vulnerable for sexual exploitation and harassment as well. uh, as Bama talked in Sangati about an incident where an old lady talked about her granddaughter that when she went out to pull grass for the cow, the owner of the field said that he would help her lift the bundle onto her head. This was his excuse for squeezing the breast of that granddaughter. So the economic dependence of Dalit women is also making them vulnerable in the face of sexual violence, which and in the case of Dalit women, their susceptibility to such attacks increase manifold because the powerlessness of their caste and their economic dependence. And Dalit men violence and Dalit women bodies. The operation that Dalit men faces at the hand of their upper caste men, they in turn channelize it towards the operation of their women. Dalit women who are marginalized owing to their Dalit identity are further forced to the fringe by their men. They are removed from the decision-making bodies, as Bama talked that in the panchayats there were no women to talk about the condition of women, and they also have to bear the burden of their gender as well as caste. Even when they appear in Dalit men writings, they mostly appear as women. They mostly appear as mother. Even in Dalit politics, they are just present to show the numbers, and their issues are not discussed as important issues. Their presentation there is only to show the solidarity within the Dalit community. Even in the Dalit Panther movement, which started in 1972, they are simply presented as sexual beings or as mothers, and they're all again the Dalit Panthers have written then that our women has to face them rather than giving them an identity of their own, that the women of our rather than women talking about their own situation, it was men talking about their situation. As violence accompanied power in case of Dalit women being devoid of power within their own community make them vulnerable in the face of violence. Referred by Rithma Norma as Dalits among Dalits, they are deprived of balanced and equal relation with their men. The internalization of male superiority within the community lead to varied discrimination within the Dalit community. Bama has talked about how Dalit women face violence within her own community. She has talked about her maternal aunt's death, and her grandmother said this to her, quote, I reared a parrot and then handed it over to be mauled by a cat. Your Periappan actually beat her to death. My womb, which gave birth to her, is still on fire. He killed her so outrageously, the bastard, unquote. The Dalit men, because of their internalized patriarchy, came to regard their women as their property. The Dalit women who work alongside their men from dusk to dawn has also faced the hardship posited to them at the end of their day job. Despite being a wage earner, a Dalit woman has to a Dalit woman is still abused by her men. By the Dalit women are still abused by their men. Bama says in again in Sangati quote, "She is my wife. I can beat her or even kill her if I want." Unquote. Even the games that the kids play, that there it has the patriarchal it portrays the patriarchal mindset of their society. The young girls and boys turn the daily scenario of their life into the games that they play. The internal patriarchy persistent in the Dalit society has always been trivialized by the Dalit male writers, while Kancha Elia refers to this as patriarchal democracy, where a Dalit woman has the freedom to fight back to their men because they are not dependent on Dalit men for their economic well-being. The real situation is grave. Even after shouldering the responsibility in a patriarchal system, they are still harassed within the family. Emancipation through education. Ambedkar's slogan "Educate, Unite, Struggle" foremost focuses on the struggle of Dalits. For him, the emancipation of Dalits is possible only after attaining education. For Dalit women, education is not only a way of liberation but also a tool against the oppressive patriarchal forces. Bama, in her Sangati and Karuku, has highlighted the need of education by Dalits. She has also talked about that as she, as a Dalit girl, has been marginalized by teachers. In
Talat,
Sangati, yes, ma'am.
yeah, you have 5 more minutes.
Okay, ma'am. I'll just wind it up. She has been marginalized by the teachers, and she has highlighted that she has been how other Dalit students are forced to sit outside the class. Mm, at school, the Dalit women not only have to endure the physical torture meted out to them at the hands of upper caste teacher and class fellows, but also the verbal insult hurled at them. However, while talking about education, she not only emphasizes on Dalit men's education but also on Dalit women's education. Education emancipation for women literally means asserting their self, which can be gained through education. In case of Dalit women, to have a holistic development, to make their presence known and their voices heard, education is a necessity. Writing asserting the self. Women, despite being half of the population, has still not given their due position in the society. In a society like India, where patriarchy regulates every moment of a woman's life, they are unheard, and within their own community, dominance prevails and power rests in the hands of men. The life narrative of Dalit women, semi-personal and personal both, document the patriarchal force prevalent in their society. These documentations are actually taking form of an literature that aims to construct a counter discourse by raising awareness in the Dalit community. Bama Bama's work not only increases awareness within her own people regarding their degraded condition, but she also wishes to escape it by shattering the hierarchies. She uses her own experience to demonstrate the plight of Dalits. Though she was first vilified for her work, people eventually realized and identified with her. Mm, by writing about the experience of herself and as well as the experience of other Dalit women like her grandmother, her neighbor, her cousin, Mariamma, her aunt Thai, Bama has talked that they Dalit women should not accept injustice and be frightened of people around them. Bama message to all Dalit women is that they should realize their self-worth, honor, and self-respect. Bama, through her works, Sangati and Karuku, has brought her thoughts and experience about the existent issues of Dalit women in her community. She has also talked about girls' education, wife beating, sexual abuse and dishonor, disparity in wage payment, especially for same work. The present paper was a modest attempt to highlight the issues of Dalit women while at the same time pointing out the counter-resistive forces employed by them. These works, in both her works, Bama has used literature as a tool to highlight the patriarchal imbalances and suffering faced by Dalit women. In the process, she has also highlighted how the Dalit women's stories has metamorphosized from the story of helplessness to that of resistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Talat. We now move on to the next presenter. Please, everyone, write your questions in the chat box right away as it occurs, because we might forget them in the end. So please write down your questions. I'll invite you to switch on your video and ask your question, but at least let us document those questions which are occurring to us right now. Okay, so the next presenter for the panel is Atufah Nishat. She will be presenting her paper titled Theorizing Anti-Casteism by Placing the Dalit Woman at the Intersection. Atufah, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the introduction. And I would extend my good morning to everyone, to the chair and to the fellow speakers. I have learned so much from Arijeet's and Talat's respective papers. So thank you. I will begin my paper, but before I delve into reading out my paper, I want to just lay out the central conceptual framework of my paper, which is the concept of intersectionality. The concept of intersectionality was given by Kimberly Crenshaw, where she writes that when we are looking at the experiences of women, especially the marginalized women, we must place her at the intersection, at the center, at the junction, and see how the various forms of oppression are working upon her. So today the topic is theorizing on anti-casteism, and we have this today's conference on talking about how we can theorize on anti-casteism. So the proposition that I lay out in this paper is that when we are attempting to study, to theorize the Dalit woman, we should always place her at the intersection and see how various forms of oppression are working upon her. So, for instance, the Dalit woman lies at the intersection of not only gender oppression but also caste oppression. If she's a lower class Dalit woman, then there is class oppression. If she belongs to the LGBTQIA community, another form of oppression. If she's disabled, we add that. So there are so many vectors and axes which are working upon her and producing her everyday life. So all these oppressions simultaneously working upon her. So this concept has inspired me to write my paper, and it is this becomes the starting point for me to start reading my paper. So the title of my paper is Theorizing on Anti-Casteism by Placing the Dalit Woman at the Intersection. After 73 years of independence, India is flourishing as the world's biggest democratic institution, taking pride in its economic development. Despite all its glory, the country still struggles to come out of the clutches of the caste system, which has denied generations of Dalits their rights and dignity. Economic development neither guarantees a society free from the evils of caste system nor frees the Dalit body from the stigma and humiliation they face. India's caste system provides a fertile ground on which humiliation and untouchability is still being played out in different forms. Gopal Guru writes that structures of humiliation are produced and built within this context of caste system and oppression. It is in this context that this paper tries to study the everyday experiences of violence and humiliation at the workplace of women belonging to the lower caste manual scavenging community of Kolkata who belong to the Dome community. The vantage point of the Dalit woman becomes important as the women of the Dome community lie at the intersection of various forms of oppression and marginalization. The concept of intersectionality by Crenshaw is crucial for understanding the experiences of these women. This paper tries to map out and understand the concept of intersectionality and see how these structures of oppression play out in her everyday life and produce her everyday life. This paper will attempt to place the experiences of Dalit women vis-a-vis their male counterparts and also upper caste women and upper caste lower class women. So I'm placing the Dalit woman vis-a-vis all these categories and seeing that how they're different, how their experiences differ or are similar to these categories. This paper tries to explore that how lying at the intersection produces evidences of violence and humiliation for the Dalit woman. I will quickly describe the field of this research. This research was a part of my master's dissertation, so I'm just reading out a part of it. Domes of Kolkata live in a slum area called Dome Basti, which is situated around the New Market area. For this research, 9 women were interviewed. Out of the 9 women interviewed, 8 women work as latrine cleaners, and one of them works in the Kolkata Municipal Corporation office. For this research, face-to-face interviews was conducted, semi-structured interview, and just narratives have been collected, which some of the narratives I will be discussing today. So, experiencing violence at the intersection. So, the first section of the paper will place the Dome woman vis-a-vis the upper caste women and the upper caste lower class women, and see the experiences of the Dome woman. The women interviewed for this research are working women who work as domestic helpers or as toilet cleaners, while the women of the upper caste, lower class, are the cooks of the house, which is a better paid job. Dome women reported that they are never given a job of a cook. Women of the Dome Basti reported that none of them ever found any work other than that of a toilet cleaner or household sweepers. No upper caste household would ever employ a lower caste Dome woman as a cook or a caretaker, like ayah for children. Identity plays a crucial role for these women in finding their job. The fact that these women belong to the lower caste is a matter of obstacle for them. On asking why they've never found jobs as a cook, Rakhi said, "Who will have food cooked by our hands? I am a lower caste woman. Nobody will have food cooked by me." This resonates with the age-old concept of upper caste not accepting food and water from the lower caste. The respondents reported that finding good job was difficult because in that area everyone knew their identity, that is their identity of being a Dome. Thus, the Dome woman would always be relegated to the job of sweeping and cleaning latrines by the upper caste women because of their identity. While the upper caste, lower class woman takes up the job of a cook or nannies, the lower caste, lower class woman is employed in the most polluted job. All the women interviewed for this research and most of the women of the Dome Basti are employed as domestic sweepers or toilet cleaners in and around the New Market area. Domestic service is distinct from other forms of employment because women's domestic work is always seen as an extension of her innate qualities of being woman. There seems to be a historically established relationship between domestic work and femininity, and this relation has remained unbroken and unchallenged since time immemorial. And since domestic work is woman's work, it is regarded as less valuable. But here is one point of difference. The work that the Dome woman is employed in, which is cleaning of the latrines or domestic sweepers, that is also domestic work. But she is not only doing less valuable work because of the quality of being a woman, but she's also doing the most polluting work because of her Dalit identity. So the women of Dome Basti are not only involved in domestic work that is devalued, but is involved in a work that is most polluting. According to Gita, the Dalit body is reduced to doing all kinds of impure work because, contrary to the bodies of the upper caste, whose bodies have some symbolic value to offer, the lower caste Dalit body is devoid of value. The Dalit body does not secrete any material or symbolic value. Thus, the untouchable body becomes a laboring body whose work is to carry out the hazardous, unclean, impure, profane job of the society. Thus, their work is assigned the dual quality of being less valuable and most polluting. The Dalit woman is not only involved in a work that is essentially considered to be an extension of her female qualities, thus marking her work as less valuable, but also her Dalit identity, her Dalit body, which is considered to be most polluting, that also plays out in the workplace. So she is employed in a work which is an extension of her two marginalized identity, the identity of being a woman and the identity of being a Dalit. So there, and hence the work that she does is less valuable, least valuable, and most polluting. Lucky said, "Who will give us jobs? Everyone knows in the area that we are from the Dome Basti. We never get jobs other than latrine cleaners." Here, caste, class, and gender intersect in such a manner that it relegates her to the most unsafe, unclean job. While the economically weak upper caste woman may find domestic work as a cook or caretaker, the lower caste Dalit woman may never find one. The upper caste, economically weak woman lies at the intersection of class and gender oppression, but the dome woman lies at the intersection of gender, caste, and class. It is because of a caste that she is left to take up the most polluting job in the society that no one else would do. One should take note of the caste angle that is being played out over here. Positioned at the intersection of caste, class, and gender oppression, these women narrated everyday instances of violence and untouchability that they experienced at their workplace. Meera, a toilet cleaner, narrated incidents from her life when her madam asked her to wash her feet before entering her bedroom toilet. Shanta, who is 52 years old, works as a toilet cleaner. She said, "When I leave their house, one more domestic helper cleans the room. They clean the house immediately after I leave." I asked the respondents, Shanta, Lucky, Gutti, if the other domestic helpers who are not from the Dome Basti and are employed in the same household, if they had separate glasses and seating area, and all of them replied with a yes. So while having separate utensils for domestic helpers may be a common practice amongst high-class caste households and experienced by both high and low-caste women domestic workers, the cleaning of footsteps, narrated by two respondents, is a practice peculiar to the Dome woman only. This echoes the age-old belief that the Shudras or the Dalit bodies are so impure that their footsteps need to be cleaned. In instances like these, caste plays a very glaring role to marginalize and produce violence. The act of cleaning footsteps of the Dalit woman worker is an attempt by the upper caste madams to reinforce their superior position and their pure position, while the lower class upper caste woman is safe from such humiliation because of her caste identity. The lower caste, lower class Dalit woman is the most impure. More impure not only than her madam who's employing her, but more impure than all the other domestic workers who do not belong to the Dome Basti, but probably belongs to a higher caste. The next section that I'm going to discuss is the male counterparts. So first, I will discuss about how the Dome woman is positioned vis-a-vis the upper caste men, and then positioned vis-a-vis her own men, Dalit men. The experience of Dome women are also very different from the male counterparts. While the men of the Dome Basti are sweepers under Kolkata Municipal Corporation or clean the streets and drains, the women of the Dome Basti are exclusively domestic cleaners and toilet cleaners. Now, here is the difference. Men of the Dome Basti are employed in the formal economy. They work under KMC, Kolkata Municipal Corporation. But the Dome woman here is relegated to the informal economy. And we all know that domestic helper work, which is situated in the informal economy, is rampant with exploitation. And there is no form of regulation or accountability. So that is first and foremost the first kind of marginalized that she's facing. So while the Dalit men are, I'm not saying that Dalit men do not face marginalization at their workplace. Of course they do. But here I'm just talking about how formal and informal economy also comes into the scene, where women are subjected to, Dalit women subjected to the informal economy. The kind of exploitation that is meted out of them, there's no accountability for that, because informal economy does not have that kind of a bureaucratic structures. Thus, we see how caste and gender both operate simultaneously to marginalize the Dome woman. Dalit feminism sees how caste and gender are two interrelated structures of oppression that simultaneously and actively operate to oppress the Dalit woman. Caste and gender are interwoven in such a way that sometimes these two structures overlap to produce instances of everyday violence and exploitation. The respondents who work as toilet cleaners or domestic cleaners reported that their male counterparts who clean offices do not face such harsh treatment. This is because they work in formal office spaces where the upper caste people in the office space have some level of accountability vis-a-vis the office rules. Dome women are bereft of this benefit since most of the Dome women work as domestic cleaners and thus fall under the informal economy. Work in the informal economy is unregulated and there's no redressal for the Dalit woman. This is the reason why instances of violence are so extreme. Hence, we see how caste and gender simultaneously push the Dome woman to a more marginalized and exploitative position. Nirmala, okay, a few of the women who do find work in the formal economy, say in Kolkata Municipal Corporation, they've also said that the kind of treatment that is meted out to them is more harsh. So Nirmala, a widow, who's the only woman who works in the Kolkata Municipal Corporation office, who's a sweeper, says that how men make her do the extra work. They tell me to get things for them from the store, like now and then the sahib will ask me to get a cigarette or a pan. I cannot say no to them, even though this isn't my work. My shift is till 1 p.m., but sometimes this extra work causes delay and I go home by 3 to 4 p.m. Sometimes some sahibs will tell me that I should go and get their tiffins from their home. I walk to their homes and walk back to the office. I cannot say no to them. This will risk my job. How will I feed my son? Dome men who work in the offices are never made to do these extra work. But Dome women are so devalued and dehumanized that the upper caste men often treat the lower caste women as their servants to carry out informal work beyond the ambit of their job responsibility. In instances like these, the Dalit woman is denied humanity, but she is treated like a subhuman. Again, this finds explanation to what Gita said, that this is because their bodies are not assigned any value. Now I'm going to talk about the male counterparts at home. So it is not only the upper caste men at work that exploits her, but their own men, which is their husbands or men of the Dome community, Dome Basti, that exploit the Dalit women's labor. While men work only one shift a day and return to the Basti by 3 p.m., women of the Dome Basti work in double to triple shifts. The time that is left after household chores and working in the public sphere is then assigned to do extra work to earn some extra money and make ends meet. Around 6:30 to 7 p.m. when women find some free time, they weave baskets or make pickle. While men of the Basti drink in groups and play cards after work, women work one shift after another to earn some extra money for their family. The families of Dome Basti are very poor, with an average income of 8 to 10,000. The burden to feed the children and run the household ultimately falls on the Dome woman. She works all day, one shift after another, to make ends meet. Men of the Dome Basti work in one shift in the public sphere and then come home and conveniently enjoy their leisure time. Women of the Dome Basti have no time for themselves, as most of them reported that the whole day is spent doing one work after another. And Ali Hochschild writes that, contrary to men who work in a single shift, women often work in double shifts, one in the public sphere and the second in the domestic sphere, which is doing the household chores. The Dalit woman is not only doing 2 shifts of work, she's obviously working at the public sphere, she's coming back home doing the household chores, but there is a triple shift. The third shift is that she does this extra work to make ends meet. So in this extra time where the men, the women, the men of the Dome community are having the leisure time, the woman of the Dome community is weaving baskets to make the extra money so that the household responsibility can be carried out. So thus the Dome woman works in triple shifts. In the case of the women of Dome Basti, I've already said this point, they not only work in double shifts, but in triple shifts. In conclusion, the Dome woman lies at the intersection of caste, class, and gender oppression that constitutes, in covert and overt ways, experiences of humiliation, exploitation, marginalization in the public sphere of the Dalit woman. This paper used the concept of intersectionality and placed the experiences of Dom women vis-a-vis her upper caste, lower class counterparts to show how a Dom woman's identity, caste identity, marginalized her more than the female domestic workers who are upper caste, even though they share the same gender identity. Similarly, Dom women face more marginalization compared to their male counterparts, even though both Dom men and Dom women share the same caste identity. So here, gender plays out. While Dom men occupy the formal economy, Dom women relegated to the informal economy. Even if a few Dom women who do find some space in the formal economy, they face more violence at the workplace. And at home, their men exploit the labor. Dom women.
You have to conclude now. Yeah. In
Yes.
3 minutes. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, thank you. Thus, to understand the everyday lives and social interactions of a Dalit woman, one must adopt an intersectional perspective to view their life experiences. An intersectional perspective that views the Dalit woman through the lens of caste, class, gender, ableism, sexuality, and other structures of oppression will show us the fragmented and complex ways in which the Dalit lives can be studied. In order to theorize on anti-casteism, the vantage point of the Dalit woman, who lies at the intersection of various forms of oppression and multiple forms of patriarchy, it becomes a way forward to undertake any study on Dalit women. Thus, I conclude by saying that since we are talking about theorizing on anti-casteism, intersectionality as a methodological conceptual tool becomes very, very important to study the Dalit woman. Thank you.
Thank you, Atufah, for concluding on time. Now, let me quickly invite Sanghamitra. Sanghamitra Baladhikari is a doctoral candidate at the Department of English, St. Xavier's University. She'll be reading her paper, Situating the Caste and Gender-Based Atrocities in Herstory of Dalit Women, a reading of Dalit Feminism and Intersectionality. Welcome, Sanghamitra. Over to you. You have 20 minutes. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. My regards to you and all other co-presenters. So, as ma'am said, my paper title is Situating the Caste and Gender-Based Atrocities in Herstory of Dalit Women, a reading of Dalit Feminism and Intersectionality. The Dalit community is a victim of the casteist tendencies and actions in India for a very, very long time. In one of the books, Broken Voices, Mason John Valery had stated that it is estimated in India today 1 in 25 people suffers caste discrimination on the basis of their work, their bloodline, or their religion. With facts such as rape cases of Dalit women in India, assaults of Dalit community, and the casteist attitude of the mainstream society, the experiences of oppression among the Dalit and especially of Dalit women has been overwhelming. In one of the books, Spotted Goddesses, Dalit Women's Agency Narratives on Caste and Gender Violence, the author cites a significant finding which throws light on the facts of violence against Dalit women in India. The author cites a documentation of a human rights organization in the state of Tamil Nadu named People's Watch, which recorded 1,346 cases of rape of Dalit women and 4,410 specific cases of physical violence against Dalit in 2009, and only 268 of these cases made to the courtroom. The 1,000-year-old caste system and the Dalit women's cry for dignity has been a long-standing struggle in the history of India. And the caste system has established a social hierarchy that segregates the narratives and experiences of Dalit women from the mainstream discourse of rights. Now, the narratives and experiences of Dalit women in this paper, I propose to title as Herstories. Their stories reflect the nature of abhorrent atrocities and oppression that the community has undergone past, present, and through this, Kimberly Crenshaw's theorization of intersectionality in feminist theories, which means multiple modes of marginalization, explores the ways in which a person or a community's social identity can intertwine in generating experiences of oppression and discrimination. So, through the intersectional approach, I will examine the experiences of Dalit women, which I propose as her stories of Dalit women in India, experiencing the gender based atrocities and the depths of inequalities, with special emphasis on the on the analysis of specific case violence where caste intersects with gender, for example, the Hathras rape case. Now, beginning with the defining the caste, the word Dalit means crushed, which is universally meant as broken, and as the literal meaning suggests, the social and cultural positioning of the Dalits in India is marginalized, vulnerable, and broken. Whereas the origins of caste in India are lost in the phenomena of history, the positioning of the Dalits in India are still under attack, constantly under surveillance, all spatially, economically, and culturally. Caste and various types of castes dominates and limits, in this case, the voice of the Dalits through repressive tools of subjugation. The popularization of the term Dalit was chronicled by the leader of the Dalit movement in India, Dr. Ambedkar, and the term was used to counter the undignified and discrediting stigma that the Dalits have to bear as untouchables. In their risked and vulnerable state, the Dalits, especially the Dalit women, are constantly subjected to violence, and hence the need for Dalit feminism comes into question. Now, Dalit feminism and gender based atrocities in her stories of Dalit women. The Dalit women who demand, behests, and seeks to regain the lost human dignity is one of the significant reasons and the basic reasons for Dalit feminism. There is a need to reconsider Dalit women's history in India to construct their identity and agency in the society. The discovery of the united selfhood among Dalit women through Dalit feminism will form a reorientation of the present Indian feminism, which can contain and readdress properly towards gender justice. The ignorance of the Dalits in the gender discourse has been problematic in India. This is because Dalit women holds a subordinate position in a most organized production of feminist knowledge. Therefore, the theorization of Indian feminism needs the interrogation and redefinition of mainstream Indian feminism from the perspective of the Dalits. I quote from the Dalit feminist book, which is on from page 2. Through the caste-sensitive approach, notions of patriarchy and feminism will lead to rebuilding of the feminist theory. Dalit feminist theory investigates the relation between gender and caste, considering perspectival limits of feminist thesis. As mainstream feminists for most part have neglected the question of caste, the inclusion of Dalit feminist thought substantively furthers the feminist ideals of freedom, equality, solidarity, where they can acquire a more collective tone. The Hathras Herstory. Now, India has witnessed various forms of gender-based atrocities on Dalit women, exposing the ruthless caste-based hierarchy in India. In 2020, a 19-year-old Dalit woman was gang raped and assaulted by a group of upper caste men in the state of Uttar Pradesh, and the course of the event structured the nature of marginalization and re-victimization of the victim. The attack on the Dalit women, the delay in the registration of the police complaint, the lack of scrutiny in the investigation, questioning the victim about the reality of the incident, and the compliance of the authorities with the upper caste perpetrators of the violence as the aftermath, suppresses the victim's voice, or what I call her story, in this situation. In India, the NCRB Records Bureau, the NCRB, or the National Crime Records Bureau, has registered 33,000 or more rape cases in 2018, and out of which it was estimated that 11% of the registered cases, Dalit women were victims of assault and rape. Now, these incidents, these records, and the Hathras her story reflects the wide, pervasive, extremist casteist approach. And these incidents, instead of being considered as general incidents of crime in India, must be theorized and understood from the perspective of deep-rooted structural violence of casteism and patriarchy. In another record of the NCRB in 2019, it is stated that approximately 10 women who are Dalits are victims of rape every day, and the state of Uttar Pradesh has been the highest number in these cases. in these cases, and so the social being in the Hathras case, the victims. The cremation of the victim's body without the consent of the family draws a very significant question about the systematic sanctioning of the violation of Dalit women's rights, and the social being as well as the body of the Dalit women in this question is subjected to violence and exposes a form of impunity that the perpetrators enjoy. Their voices and the bodies become conveyors of cultural expressions as well as dangers. Her stories, or the experiences, the lived experiences that Dalit women undergo, contain the absolute anguish and ordeal that Dalit women undergo, and they are being targets of attack. And in the larger community, their stories and cultural voices are pushed into an invisible space. Despite the realities that contain in the stories of Dalit women, the cultural invisibility sets them out for selective visibility, especially as being sexual praise. Now, in the case of the gang rape of Bhanwari Devi in the year 1992, which we are all well aware of, there is a display of such selective visibility, where the acquittal of the perpetrators was based on the power relations that the upper caste men maintained. It was stated that due to reasons of purity, the upper caste men will not rape a Dalit woman. These instances of reality of the Herstories of Dalit women, cloaked within the cultural invisibility upon them in the society and the justice system, exposes the threatened state of affair regarding the position of Dalit women. Therefore, there is a need to reconceptualize the voices of the Dalit women through an intersectional approach, because Dalit women's identity has a multiplicity of lived experiences. There is a plurality of these experiences, and a single theoretical standpoint limits the understanding of these experiences. Kimberly Crenshaw had, as the previous speaker had stated, had coined the term intersectionality while explaining the oppression that African American women had undergone over the years. And intersectionality over the years have become an academic term to use theories of racial justice, identity politics, surveillance, and policing shaping socio-legal and literary discourses. The multiple modes of discrimination due to factors such as gender, ethnicity, race is intersectionality, or perceiving the issues of feminism from intersections of gender, caste, and class is intersectionality. Now, in the Indian scenario, theorists such as Nivedita Menon has provided a number of arguments about the non-applicability of intersectionality in the Indian scenario. She had suggested that intersectionality had originated in the Western framework based on the Western experience, which is inapplicable in the non-West. However, Mary E. John criticizes Menon's rejection of the non-applicability of intersectionality in India, demanding the engagement with the concept to facilitate us to attain gender justice. So the violence exists. This violence, and most importantly, sexual violence, has been a permanent threat to the Dalit women, and it exists as a tool of punishment for asserting their rights, which are against the norms of caste hierarchy. The torment and victimization that Dalit women undergo when violence such as rape, assault, and murder is inflicted upon them is a form of disciplining that they undergo at the hands of the upper caste. The Dalit women in this scenario becomes vulnerable and an open target for wrath of the upper caste. Sharmila Rege, in an article titled Intersections of Gender and Caste, has argued that in analyzing the caste and gender matrix in Indian society, merely pluralizing the term patriarchy is not enough. The task is to map the ways in which the category women is being differently reconstituted within regionally diverse patriarchal relations crosshatched by graded caste inequalities. The intersections of caste and gender forms an encounter which is also evident in the Bhanwari Devi case, as mentioned. Now, Bhanwari Devi was working against, she was actively working against the marriage of an infant, which was customary at that time, and consequently, she was gang raped by the upper caste. Now, the rape and assault that was inflicted upon Bhanwari Devi because of her activism against the marriage of a 1-year-old was considered as a form of interference, which was questionable as well as objectionable by the upper caste men. The caste stratified society abhors Dalit women's involvement in the upper caste decision making. Now, it poses two questions. Firstly, if Devi had been from an upper caste family, would she had been exposed to such violence that she had to bear as a Dalit woman? And secondly, if Devi had been a male person actively involved in interfering against the marriage of a 1-year-old, would she have suffered the heinous violence that as a Dalit woman bore? Now, from the study of caste and gender intersections, the responses to both these questions reflect as being negative. The belongingness to the upper class family and being a male activist would prevent the kind and nature of violence that was inflicted upon Bhanwari Devi. And therefore, in response to these instances, Menon's rejection of intersectionality at the local level in India seems problematic. And as she stated, that a single axis framework is required to understand the intersectionality is sort of thought as dysfunctional. And therefore, the recognition of differences through intersectionality in the Herstories of Dalit women does not distort their realities. As I had previously mentioned, it pushes their realities into a cultural invisibility and it does not push their realities into a cultural visibility. And these differences, the recognition of these differences of the experiences that Dalit women undergo can play a significant role in demanding justice. Okay, her stories exemplify that a unique understanding is perceived when the kind of discrimination is seen through the lens of intersection. The need for a single-lined theory limits the understanding of the varied experiences of violence that Dalit women face. And the intersectional approach, therefore, provides a multiple-lined framework of caste, class, and gender and can challenge the patriarchal casteist ideology. The difference in Indian feminism is achieved when gender-based atrocities are addressed surrounding the question of caste, as also suggested by theorists such as Sharmila Rege and Mary E. John, putting forward the Dalit difference. Now, in comparison to the Western feminist philosophy, Kimberly Crenshaw's idea on intersectionality was based upon the ignorance of the element of race in the first world feminism, and the tool of intersectionality was used to recognize the difference. The discrimination that Black women face because of race and gender is a different kind of experience that they undergo. And Patricia Hill Collins theorizes that gender justice must acknowledge this difference in experiences of Black women, and it must be for women of all races. The theoretical ground of intersectionality is thus seminal in both Western as well as Indian feminism, and feminist philosophy is unfinished without the difference of caste perspective. One of the theorists, Pita Patil, asserts that Dalit feminist thought has an epistemic vantage location to challenge the authenticity of knowledge that is generated for the emancipation of the oppressed through pointing out the...
Yes, sorry to interrupt. You have to conclude in 4-5 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Thank you, ma'am. Through pointing out the caste come class privilege of the dominant intelligentsia and institutional histories. Now, going back to the Ambedkar's philosophy, the devaluation of Dalit women through violence on their bodies by the dominant class takes a double role of victimization. And as Ambedkar had suggested, Dr. Ambedkar had suggested, the intersections of caste and gender has to be recognized to address if the contemporary injustices against the Dalit women are to be resolved or even attempted to be resolved. And he had stated that caste system is structured upon hierarchy of the Hindu culture and Brahmanical patriarchy. And the marginalization is therefore deep-rooted, especially women belonging to the lowest strata of caste. So their participation is significant in the liberation of Dalit women. And Dalit women, her stories from the Ambedkarite point of view, reflects the need for removing their inferior status through a gynocentric society, a society which subverts the notions established by patriarchy, and a society which tries to push the Dalit hardships in the space of cultural invisibility. And this, as one of the earlier speakers have also mentioned, is who was referring to Bama's suggestion of Dalit women acquiring education and ensuring participation socially and politically. Finally, the development of a consciousness of suffering and ordeal that Indian women, especially the Dalit Indian women, has undergone, will become an epistemological break in Ambedkar's appeal. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Sanghamitra. So now we have our floor open. I am not summarizing papers because we have very less time, and I think we have questions. We already have 2 questions in the chat box. But let me quickly say that 3 of the papers, Atufah, Talat, and Sanghamitra, they situated Dalit women in different contexts and studied them. And Arijeet, he has studied Disgust philosophically, which I am completely an outsider. I am hardly into philosophy, so I'm really sorry, Arijeet, if I cannot, comment on it extensively. I think let us have questions so that we can get into the details of what have been you theorizing. So there are 2 questions in the chat box, and both of them are from YouTube. And I have certain broad questions which I wanted to list so that all of you can think while you can choose to answer these questions, or you can not choose to answer these questions. But there are certain broad questions I would like to put forth before reading out these 2 questions from the YouTube. So my questions to the 3 papers which situated Dalit women as their central analytical category. How do you define Dalit? Because Dalit is a political category, and a lot of time it has been, used as a synonyms to SC category. So how do you define? What is your way to operationalize the category Dalit? Because sometimes we become mechanical in operationalizing the category Dalit. So how do you define this category, and how do you make sense of the governmental category which runs parallel to this political category? My second observation was in 2 of the papers, apart from highlighting the oppression of Dalit women in the Brahmanical world or in the larger patriarchy, you are also trying to underline the relationship between Dalit men and Dalit women, and you are comparing their lives. So my question would be, and to put it crudely, maybe I am not framing it very properly, but what would we yield theoretically and politically by implicating Dalit men? Is a question I would like to pose. What would we yield by implicating Dalit men? Because Dalit men themselves are vulnerable in the caste society. So, how do we make sense of such scholarship politically and theoretically is a question crudely put, and are we reducing a larger social problem into a narrow site? Like this is a broad rough question which I think I can formulate it better, but I hope you got the gist of my question. And the third observation which I have in mind, Dalit and Brahmin, these two categories are emerging again and again in all the papers. And most of the time, these two categories are utilized to study anti-caste, to theorize anti-casteism. Or to study casteism, Brahmin and Dalit are the two central categories. I would say, can we theorize anti-casteism with just these two categories? Because where do we look at graded inequality, the idea of graded inequality, when we are just talking in terms of binary of Dalit and Brahmin, is a question I would like to push. And there are specific questions for Arijeet. Should I just pose them now so that you can think
Yeah,
of
yeah.
them? Yeah. So, Arijeet, I was wondering, because I am thinking about this question sociologically, can we think of sociological works that look at disgust? Like, do we have ethnographic work, or do we have other qualitative kind of, interventions in this, like from sociological point of view? And what happens when my second question, what happens to disgust when religious conversion happen? Because most of the time, to move away from this disgusting feeling of others, or to dissociate themselves from disgusting feeling of the fellow religion, men of the fellow religion, or women of the fellow religion, they people have fought by converting themselves into something else. So religious conversations have happened, acquiring newer identities have happened. So what happens to disgust in those sites is a question I would like to ask. And the final question would be, because rasa is a Sanskritic term, do we have studies on local expressions of disgust? Yeah, so these are the broad questions.
Should I go first?
Yeah, any one of you can go first. So yeah, Arijeet can go first.
Okay, so I would answer first your broad question about the Dalit and the naming of the Dalit, and that partially also addresses the question, some other related questions. I have tried to maintain that this about the custom when it's specifically about the Shudra, it comes in this particular category. I have used this line. It is this style is called Chatushkoti, which is one question can become 4, one question can become 2, and then it can become 4. You can see this in Veda as well as in Buddhist works as well. Specifically in Buddhist, I mean, you can see from right from Vedic, in Buddhist Dhammapada as well as Pragya Paramita, the verse. So, disgust in caste society is therefore both in being, not being, and not being for the repressed castes. An example would be the case where one faces disgust first as Shudra, second as Dalit, and the third as Dalit with a library card or a political ambition. So it's a so basically you were born with essential quality between your skin and heart, somewhere deep inside you is supposed to be some kind of you know quality that makes you from that caste, and then that in itself is disgusting. Now, when you gain a political understanding, a political consciousness, and call yourself Dalit, or just for the social recognition, call yourself Dalit, then it becomes problematic and it becomes disgusting. And lastly, when the order by getting educated or having a political ambition, you get further, at the tail end of disgust. But I'm seeing Dalit as a more of a specific term where um, people who are at the tail end of the most repressed in the Brahminical system. But this does not that I Dalit or Brahmin as by because uh, uh, this I specifically do not, because and there are lots of castes and subcastes who face daily basis of on the daily basis they face discrimination, but they are not in the SC list. They did not make it, or it is changing in terms of region, in terms of state, provincial policies and whatnot. So to apply one big term or one big binary would be a mistake, I think. And the philosophy of anti-casteism should be shared by all. Of course, the stake is always higher for the but the philosophy of anti-casteism, the political anti-casteism. And about your question about the sociological, the sociological works, then I have found that Sarah Ahmed's work is kind of engaging with sociology. Then there are works that are, there are different ways you can read it. For example, Fanon talks about a certain kind of a disgust in case of anti-colonial struggle, or in context of colonialism. Largely, I think the
Arijeet, your voice is breaking. Voice is breaking.
okay.
Yeah.
Am I audible now?
Better, much better.
Yeah. So I think the largely the context of sociological understanding of disgust is difficult, because disgust is a emotion, and history of emotion is very very is a subject that is more into philosophy, or say it has to do with kind of way of seeing history. It becomes difficult when it's seen purely from a sociological point of view. Then you have to first determine what does disgust mean, and that itself becomes very philosophical inclination. Yeah.
Should we give opportunity to others, or would you like to say more? Yeah.
No,
We'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, Atufah, Talat, Sanghamitra, who would like to? Yeah.
Okay, so actually, ma'am, coming for your first question about the governmental definition of Dalits and who are Dalits. Actually, earlier it was more along the line of caste system, where if they are Ati Shudras, and even the government of India, they have based their definition that SCs who have like repressed for millions of years, they are today Dalits. But with conversion, we see that Bama, even though she has converted, even though her whole family she has converted, they have converted to Christianity, they are still facing the untouchability, or whatever caste, whatever lower caste has to face. So for Dalit's definition today, I have employed the definition which has been used by Gail Omwith in her book, The Dalit Vision. Those people, hill people or Muslims or those who are like marginalized from the society, they are like discriminated, and they are the one whom I am considering as Dalits, not only to the one like who have been untouchability, who have faced untouchability, or I mean, I have a bit broadened the idea of Dalits. And coming for your second question about the operation faced by Dalit women, talking about that Dalit men, that yes, they have been oppressed, and no, there is no nothing negating the fact. Well, the thing is that if you have been oppressed, if you have been humiliated, or if your soul has been crushed, even then you don't have the liberty to oppress others, because if you are like on the other side of the margin, then you can understand the condition of the people who are like there with you. And for the Dalit, and in case of Bama's Sangati, the text which I have referred to, and Karuku also, she has highlighted about time and again she has talked about the operation that the women in her caste is facing, the women in her caste are facing. Similarly, if we go through the prison we broke by Devi Tai Kamble, she has talked about the operation faced by Dalit men. Uh, uh, she has, in fact, she has talked about the operation faced. Baby Tai Kamble has also talked about the operation faced by older women. Like even they are sharing the gender, they are sharing the caste, they are they are on the same side in every aspect. Even then, the older women like Sasu, mother-in-law in that case, they were oppressing their daughter-in-law. So just because you have been oppressed doesn't mean that you should oppress other, because if you are on the same side, and if you have been there, then you should be more empathetic and more understanding towards the condition of others. And sorry, I couldn't remember your third question. So if you please.
No worries. You need not answer all the questions in one go. You can go back to. Let me invite Atufah or Sanghamitra, because Arna is reminding me that we have to wrap up. So, yeah.
I'll talk about the third question, which I think roughly I understood as that why are we making the segregation between men and women? I'm not looking at the larger picture. It's because I feel that if we, of course, I mean, Dalit men are oppressed, but the point is that when we are only focusing on the Dalit issue, sometimes there is an erasure of then the Dalit woman's voice. So it gets subsumed under the larger Dalit issue. But where is the women's voices? So this is why having talking about the distinct Dalit women voice becomes important. And your third question was about graded inequality. So quickly want to just wrap it up in one sentence, is that of course, I mean, that's a very good point that you made, that why are we only looking at Dalit vis-a-vis the Brahmins? Firstly, because they are the purest. So it's a relational terms, of course, from purest to less pure, and then they're the least pure. So Brahmins sort of signify that they are at the top. So that is why we always relate it to them. But of course, there is a lot of inequalities that is happening even within the caste hierarchy, and even within themselves. Like, so when I conducted this research, since there was no time to talk about it in this paper, there is inequality even within the women. So there is graded inequality even within, and there is no community out there or no category out there that is a homogeneous category. So there is graded inequality in the caste ladder, but also within their own community. So that would be my answer.
Hi, Asha. This is Mohitosh. Very sorry to interrupt. Yes, so the next session starts at 12, so we need to wrap up.
Okay, yeah. So we have just one more Sanghamitra. Let her respond, and then we will conclude.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that all right, Mahitosh? Sanghamitra, please be very brief, and then I'll say thank you after Sanghamitra is done.
Yes.